I never really gave much thought to the apartment across the hall. It was just another door in a long stretch of beige walls and scuffed floors. Another neighbor I hardly noticed. The guy who lived there, Mark, or maybe it was Matt or Mike. He was one of those people you forget the second you stop looking at them. Probably in his mid-30s, lived alone, never made a sound. No parties, no loud music, no trash left sitting out. Just another quiet tenant like the rest of us. But something about his place started getting under my skin. It was not anything big, just a small, nagging detail that I could not seem to let go of, no matter how hard I tried. The curtains. I had never paid attention to them before. But now I was sure. They were always open when I was home. Every time. Sunlight pouring in during the day, and at night, that soft, yellow glow spilling out like the place was on display. It was like the guy had nothing to hide. But whenever I was not home, they were shut tight. At first, I figured it was just a weird habit. Maybe the guy liked the sunshine when he was around and wanted privacy when he stepped out. Or maybe I was just overthinking things, trying to see patterns where there were none. Still, I started testing it. One morning, I left for work just like I always did. Took the elevator, walked outside, then stopped. Pretended to look at my phone for a bit, acting like I had forgotten something. Then I turned around and came back up. The curtains? Closed. I did not knock or say a word. Just stood in front of my own door, staring at that window across the hall while my heart thudded in my chest. Next day, I tried again. Left for work, drove a few blocks, parked at a gas station. Sat there for 15, maybe 20 minutes. Then I circled back to the building. Curtains? Closed again. I kept doing it. 5 more times, different routines. Sometimes I was gone an hour. Sometimes just a couple of minutes. I even took the stairs a few times to see if it made a difference. But no matter what, the second I was out of sight, those curtains closed. And the second I came home, they were wide open again. After I caught on to that, I started noticing other things. Especially with Lisa, my wife. Little things at first, nothing I thought much of. Married life has a way of dulling the edges. You stop picking up on every small change, stop asking questions about every shift in behavior. But now I cannot ignore it anymore. She kept her phone face down. Every time. That was not something she ever used to do. She started wearing perfume around the apartment, expensive stuff I never smelled on her before, even when we went out. She dressed nicer too. Tighter jeans, new tops, fresh nails. Even on days she never stepped outside. And through it all, she still smiled at me the same, kissed me goodbye, laughed at my dumb jokes. But her eyes had changed. She looked lighter somehow, like she was carrying a secret she actually liked having. I tried to brush it off. Told myself I was being paranoid. Imagining things. Piecing together shadows into something that was not real. But deep down, my gut kept telling me something was not right. Then one night, I got the confirmation I was afraid of. My boss had called, needed me to head back into the office late to sort out some mess. Lisa kissed me goodbye like it was any other night, told me not to overwork myself, gave me the usual smile. I left like normal. Took the elevator down, but I never left the building. Instead, I stepped aside, out of the camera's line of sight, and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, I moved, quiet and careful, back up the stairs. While I reached our floor, I stood still, listening. Nothing. I eased into the hallway. The air smelled different, warm, heavy. Perfume mixed with something else. Sweat, maybe, and something I could not quite name. I turned toward the apartment across the hall. That was when I heard it. A sound. Faint. A laugh, low and muffled. Then silence. I stared at that door. My hands balled into fists, my jaw tight. Someone was laughing. In his place. This late. I stepped closer. Put my hand on the doorknob. I did not knock. Not yet. Just stood there, breathing slow, my pulse roaring in my ears. This was not my imagination. This was not a pattern I had made up. This was real. I turned the knob and walked in. The moment I stepped inside, the air slapped me in the face. That perfume, Lisa's, but stronger than she ever wore it for me. It clung to the room, thick and sweet and hard to breathe through. And there was another scent underneath it, deeper, muskier. No mistaking it. The heat in the place felt strange. like the walls themselves were keeping secrets. Everything in the living room looked the same. Couch, coffee table, television humming with some late-night show she probably left on for background noise. But all felt wrong, like it was frozen mid-lie. I slipped off my shoes. Slow, careful. I did not call her name. I just stood there listening. No sounds, no movement. She was not expecting me back. If she had been, she would have been on the couch, messing around on her phone, watching something dumb on the television, humming under her breath. But there was nothing. I walked forward, my footsteps loud on the floor, even though I was trying to be quiet. My breathing was steady, but inside I was shaking. Not from fear, from rage. I passed the kitchen. Something on the counter stopped me. A wine glass. Half full. Red wine. Lisa always drank white. Never red. The glass was stained around the rim, like someone had been gulping it. The bottle next to it was open, already halfway empty. My stomach knotted. I touched the glass with the tips of my fingers. Warm. Fresh. I turned toward the hallway. The bedroom door was cracked open just a bit. Just enough to see the edge of something moving. A shadow trying to stay still and failing. I pushed the door open all the way. The first thing I saw was the bed. Our bed. Sheets tangled, blankets kicked to one side, pillows askew. The second thing I saw was Lisa. She stood near the closet, barefoot, hair a mess, wearing one of my old t-shirts, the one she always liked to sleep in. But she looked wrong. Her face was flushed, her breathing too fast, eyes wide, guilty. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out at first. I looked around the room. Everything felt sharper. The drawer on the nightstand was slightly open. Lisa never left it like that. The bathroom door was shut all the way. That door never closed all the way when she was alone. My hands curled into fists. I stepped forward. Slow. Her eyes flicked toward the bathroom. She was hiding something. No, someone. I took a deep breath through my nose, holding back the storm inside me. Lisa licked her lips, swallowed hard, and finally said it. You are back early. That was it. No smile. No explanation. Just those words, stiff and nervous. I did not say a thing. I looked at the bathroom door. The handle moved. It was a dumb mistake. A careless, stupid slip-up. I grabbed the bathroom doorknob and yanked it open before Lisa could even move. And there he was, the neighbor. Mark? Or Matt? Or maybe Mike, whatever his name really was. Standing right there in nothing but his underwear, hands halfway, raised like he thought I might take a swing. His hair was messy, his face flushed, and he reeked of sweat and Lisa's perfume. I stared at him, at that sorry excuse for a man, standing in my bathroom. Then I turned to Lisa. She wasn't crying. She wasn't saying sorry. She wasn't even looking at me. Her eyes were fixed on him. I stood there gripping the edge of the bathroom door so tight, my knuckles turned white. The guy, taller than me by maybe an inch, skinny but not strong, stood frozen, angled like he couldn't decide whether to make a run for it or start begging. He didn't look scared. Not yet. Just ashamed, like a dog caught digging through the trash. But that fear? It was coming. Lisa still wouldn't look at me. She was standing stiff beside the bed, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her insides together. Not a tear on her face. No screams, no pleading. Not yet, anyway. She was just waiting to see what I was going to do. I let the silence hang between us. Let it fill the room until it felt like the walls might crack from the weight of it. Then I dropped my hand and stepped away from the door. The neighbor didn't move at first. His mouth opened, like he was going to say something weak, maybe try to explain, maybe toss out an apology no one asked for. I didn't give a damn. My eyes went back to Lisa. Say something, I said. My voice came out flat. Cold. She finally looked at me. What do you want me to say? Not I am sorry. Not this isn't what it looks like. Not even a lousy excuse. Just that. What do you want me to say? I could feel my hands twitch. I curled them into fists, tight, to keep from doing something I would regret. I stepped past the bathroom, past him. He flinched, pressing himself back into the tiles like he thought I was about to swing. Coward. I stopped in front of Lisa, close enough to see the way her pupils were huge. Her pulse jumping in her throat like a drum. Why him? I asked. I don't even know why I said it. Maybe I wanted her to admit it. Maybe I wanted to hear what it was she saw in a guy like that. She opened her mouth. closed it again. She started, then trailed off. She was stalling, trying to come up with something that would make this mess sound less ugly. I waited. Finally, she sighed. Shoulders sagged. She looked me in the eye. It just happened. That laugh that came out of me, it wasn't funny. Not even close. But I laughed anyway. Sharp and bitter. It just happened. Like dropping a glass. Like missing a turn on a highway. Like it wasn't her choice at all. I leaned in a little. My voice dropped to a whisper. How long? She looked down, her voice barely there. I don't. I cut her off. How long? This time she answered. For months. For months. 4 months of sneaking around. 4 months of lies. For months of her walking across the hallway the second I left for work. I nodded, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Was it worth it? I asked. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't have an answer. She knew it too. I turned back toward the neighbor. Still standing there, still in his underwear, still with that dumb look on his face like he was hoping I would just leave and forget the whole thing. His skin was slick with sweat, his hands trembling just a bit. He wanted this to be over. So did I. I bent down, grabbed his crumpled jeans off the floor, and threw them at him. Hard. They hit him in the chest, and he caught them like a kid getting called out in class. Get out, I said. His mouth opened like he might argue. Then he saw the look in my eyes and thought better of it. He scrambled into his jeans so fast he nearly lost his balance. I watched him stumble toward the door, almost slipping on the hardwood. Lisa stood still, watching me. She still hadn't cried, still hadn't said anything that mattered. Maybe she thought there was still a chance to explain. There wasn't. The second that guy disappeared into the hall, I grabbed the edge of the nightstand and slammed it to the ground. The lamp shattered. The wine glass toppled, spilling deep red across the wood, thick and slow like blood. Lisa jumped, but she still didn't scream. She was waiting. I faced her, breathing heavy, chest rising and falling like I had just run miles. I hate you, I said. The words didn't come easy, but they were true. She flinched like I had slapped her. Good. I walked past her, past the broken lamp, past the bed that wasn't mine anymore, past the wine stain that would never come out. I grabbed my keys off the counter and walked straight out. No yelling, no door slam, no scene for the neighbors. I left quiet, the kind of quiet that says more than noise ever could, the kind that hangs in the air and makes people feel sick to their stomachs. The hallway didn't smell right anymore. It was off, wrong. Her perfume was still there, but now it was tainted. It smelled like him, like both of them, like what they did. It clung to my clothes, my skin, everything. His door was shut now. Locked, probably. Like I would undo what I saw. I had seen him. In my home. In my bathroom. Half naked. Like he belonged there. I let out a breath, roll my shoulders, trying to shake off the anger crawling over my skin. It didn't help. Nothing would. I got to the elevator, hit the button, and waited. When the doors opened, I stepped inside. Alone. The numbers above ticked down 6, 5, 4 until they hit the lobby. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit me like a bucket of ice water. It was clean. It was sharp. It was nothing like the thick, choking air of that apartment. I kept walking. No idea where I was going. I just needed to move. Block after block, I walked with my hands in my pockets, thoughts racing through my head but never landing on anything. What now? That was the question. Some guys in my shoes would head straight for a bar, pound a few drinks, start a fight with the first idiot who looked at them sideways. But not me. I want to feel it. Every ounce of it. Lisa had been my whole life for 10 years. 10 years of shared routines. Shared meals. Shared silence. Shared everything. And for 4 months, she had been walking across the hallway to be with him. I clenched my jaw so tight it sent a shock down my neck. But what stuck in my head wasn't the wine, or the bed, or even the bathroom. It was the way she looked at him. That look, that was what I could not let go of. She hadn't flinched when I found him in our bathroom, standing there like a scared little boy. She hadn't cried. She hadn't begged. She just stood there, waiting. Waiting for what? For me to walk out? For me to forgive her? For me to just accept it? I let out a quiet laugh, dry and bitter. It scraped at my throat like something foreign. She never asked me to stay, never ran after me, never said she was sorry, and that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry. Somehow, My feet carried me to an old diner a few blocks down. One of those places that's been hanging on since forever, even while the city keeps changing around it. The kind with buzzing neon signs and cracked vinyl booths. Looked like the kind of place that had seen too many long nights and too many broken men. I stepped inside. The bell over the door gave a half-hearted jingle. A waitress behind the counter glanced up, middle-aged, hair pulled back, eyes that looked like they'd seen this story before. The kind of woman who didn't need to hear your problems to know you had them. She gave me a soft nod. I slid into a booth near the window, elbows on the table, staring out at the quiet street. Street lamps flickered in the glass. Everything felt still. A minute later, she walked up to my booth, pen and pad in hand. Wallaby Han? Coffee. Black. She jotted it down with a small nod and wandered off. I rubbed a hand over my face. That was when I noticed my hands were shaking. Not from nerves. Not from heartbreak. From pure, steady rage. Not the kind that explodes. The kind that builds. That sits under your skin and grows, quiet and patient. This wasn't over. Not by a mile. Lisa thought I'd walk away. She probably figured I'd go lick my wounds, feel sorry for myself, maybe even come crawling back when the sting faded. She was dead wrong. She did this, wrecked everything we built together. And now she thought she could just move on, like none of it mattered? No, that wasn't how this was going to end. And him, he was just as guilty. Maybe more. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't finished. The waitress dropped off my coffee. Hot and black, no questions asked. I didn't reach for cream, didn't touch the sugar. I just drank it as it was, burning my tongue, welcoming the pain. The diner was mostly empty. Just me, two older guys at the counter, and some long-haul trucker in a booth near the back, working through a plate of eggs like it was the only meal he'd had in days. The lights buzzed overhead. Outside, the city stayed dark and damp. I stared in my coffee and barely recognized the man looking back at me in the reflection. Lisa had been mine. For 10 years, she was the one person I thought I could count on. We shared everything. Holidays, bills, bad days, quiet mornings. Now, she was just some woman who tossed it all aside for the guy across the hall. And the thing was, I did not feel sadness. I didn't feel grief. Just hate. Hate for her. Hate for him. And worst of all, hate for myself for being so blind. For letting it happen right under my nose. I should have seen it coming. The signs are there. Lisa had always been good at putting on a show. Smiling just enough. Keeping everything neat on the surface while she snuck around in the dark. How many nights had she come home after being with him, showered, kissed me, crawled into our bed like everything was normal? How many times had I held her, told her I loved her, when she had just been in his arms? The anger in my chest was boiling now. I could feel it in my neck, in my fingertips, in the way I gripped the coffee cup so tight I thought it might crack. But the thing that haunted me most wasn't the bed. It wasn't even the lie. It was the way she looked at him. There was no guilt in her eyes. Just familiarity. Like they shared something. Like I was the outsider now. She picked him, and I hated her for it. I took another sip of coffee, forcing my mind to clear. There are two kinds of men in this world. The ones who get cheated on and do nothing. And the ones who make damn sure it never happens again. I knew which one I was going to be. Lisa didn't get to break what we had and walk away like it was no big deal. She didn't get to crawl back later, tearful and sorry, asking for forgiveness. And she sure as hell didn't get to keep living like nothing had happened. I needed a plan. An hour passed before I left that booth. The streets were quieter now. Dawn was starting to break, soft lights spilling across the buildings, washing everything in dull gray. I had no place to go. The apartment didn't feel like home anymore, not with her still in it. But somehow, without thinking, I found myself back there. Back at the building. Back where they were. I stood across the street, looking up. The apartment lights were off now. She was probably sleeping, wrapped in those same sheets, still smelling like him. I swallowed down the bile in my throat and shifted my eyes to his window. The curtains were wide open again. Of course they were. The guy had no shame. I walked inside, took the elevator up. My footsteps echoed in the hallway. Everything was still. I stopped in front of her door. Just stared. I could go in. I still had my key. I could wake her up, demand answers, scream, cry, break something. but I already knew the truth, and I didn't want her words. I turned and faced the door across the hall. His. That was the door that mattered now. I walked up, leaned in, and pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. I knocked once. Silence. I knocked again. Louder. A quiet shuffle. Movement inside. Then stillness. He was awake. Good. Let him know I was there. Let him wonder. Let him stew in that fear. I could have kicked the door in. Could have dragged him out by the collar, taught him a lesson with my fists. But not yet. I wasn't done playing. Instead, I pulled a pen from my jacket and knelt down. Wrote something big across the door. Bold. Clear. No way he'd miss it. Then I stood up, took a step back, and looked at it. Perfect. No word spoken. I just turned and walked away. He'd see it in the morning. So would she. I didn't take the elevator this time. I took the stairs. Each step felt lighter than the last, like I'd shed some part of the weight pressing down on me. But this wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't go far. Just across the street to that little park no one really used. A patch of grass, a few rusted benches, a playground with peeling paint and broken swings. The kind of place you walk by without even seeing. I dropped onto a bench with a view of the building. Arms stretched along the back, legs bouncing. The adrenaline hadn't left me yet. I was still wired, still burning from the inside. The sky had started to shift, night giving way to early morning. Then his lights flicked on, and the show began. I pictured him inside that apartment, still groggy from sleep, rubbing his eyes and stumbling toward the door, probably still in his boxers. Maybe he thought it was a package. Maybe the morning paper. Maybe he figured last night had just been some weird, ugly dream, and that I was gone. Then he'd see it. The message I left. 3 words, written big and bold with black ink right across his door. I know. That was all it took. Short. Simple. But enough to punch the air right out of his lungs. I imagined him standing there, staring at it, frozen. His hand hovering over the doorknob. Realizing this wasn't over. Realizing I wasn't some clueless fool who walked away into the night, never to be heard from again. I could see it in my mind, him sucking in a sharp breath, glancing over his shoulder toward the bedroom, wondering if Lisa was awake yet, wondering if she'd seen it too. Maybe he'd rush to wipe it off. Maybe he'd just stand there, heart thumping in his chest, suddenly aware that the fantasy he'd been living in was coming apart. Either way, the point had been made. I wasn't gone. I was watching. I sat on that cold bench for a while, letting the morning creep in, letting the air settle into my bones. I could have left, found a hotel, crashed at a buddy's place, sat in a bar somewhere, drowning it all in whiskey. But I didn't want to run. I wanted to see what came next, because now that he knew, Lisa would know too. I pictured her waking up, groggy and slow, reaching over for me, still half asleep before it hit her. I imagined her blinking into the quiet, padding barefoot into the kitchen, pouring her usual cup of coffee like it was just another morning. Maybe checking her phone, expecting a message from me. Maybe wondering if she should break the silence first. She probably thought I was off at work, cooling down, processing it all like some normal, predictable guy. And then, a knock. Not mine. His. Her mistake. Standing on our doorstep. I pictured him outside that door, shifting on his feet, nerves rattling his gut, wondering if it was smart to knock or just plain stupid, but needing to see her, needing to know where they stood now that the truth was out. I saw her opening the door in one of my old shirts, messy hair, sleep still in her eyes. Their eyes meeting, that heavy silence between them, both asking the same thing without saying a word. Now what? Then Lisa would see it. The words on his door. I know. That's when her stomach would drop. That's when it would hit her. This wasn't just some fling anymore. This wasn't just sneaking around during lunch breaks or slipping across the hall when I was gone. This was real. Now there were consequences. Now I knew. Now the fantasy was dead. I stayed on that bench, watching the world wake up around me. Dogs being walked, cars pulling out driveways, people on their phones, sipping coffee, living their lives like nothing had changed. They had no idea that just hours earlier, a marriage had snapped apart 4 stories up. No idea a man had been caught hiding in a bathroom like a coward. No idea a woman was inside, wondering how much she'd really lost. And then I saw him. The front door opened, and there he was, the neighbor. He came out fast, head down, shoulders hunched, like he wanted to vanish into the pavement. Jacket zipped to the neck, hands stuffed in his pockets, but I saw the shake in his fingers even from where I sat. He looked behind him. Once. Twice. Then bolted. Made a beeline for his car like the sidewalk might give out beneath him. Fumbled his keys. Yanked the door open. Slammed it shut behind him. Sat there for a second, hands on the wheel, not moving. Then, engine started. He peeled off down the street like hell was chasing him. I smiled. Coward. Running was the smartest thing he'd done all week. That made one down. Now it was just her. I stayed there while longer, eyes fixed on the building. She didn't follow him out. Didn't chase after him. Didn't come looking for me. She was probably pacing the floor, trying to figure out what to do next. Would she call me? Would she wait? Or was she just sitting in that apartment, staring at her coffee, realizing she had burned it all down for nothing? I checked my phone. Nothing. No texts. No missed calls. That was fine. Let her sit with it. Let the silence get heavier. Let her wonder just how far I was willing to go. Because I wasn't done. Not yet. The sun kept rising, the streets filled with more people, and everything looked so normal. A mom pushing a stroller. A guy walking his golden retriever. A group of kids laughing too loud, shoving each other like school was the worst thing in the world. And here I was, watching from a park bench while the life I built turned to ash. No one knew. No one could tell a thing was wrong just by looking at the building. But I knew. I knew everything. Eventually, I stood up. My legs had gone stiff, my hands were cold, but I didn't care. I took one last look at that window, at those open curtains, and I walked. I needed a shower, clean clothes, a place to think. I needed to figure out my next move. Because this wasn't the end. Not for me. Not for her. And definitely not for him. I found a cheap motel a few blocks away. Nothing fancy. Just four walls, a bed, and a front desk clerk who didn't care why I was there. Cash or card? He mumbled without looking up. Cash. I slapped a few bills down, took the key, and headed for the room. It smelled like bleach and old smoke. Good. I tossed my coat onto a chair, kicked off my shoes, and stood there, right in the center of that small, ugly room. I hadn't slept, had barely eaten, and I wasn't tired. I was wired, alive in a way I hadn't been in years. Because something was coming, and I wasn't about to let it pass without leaving a mark. I had been running on nothing but adrenaline since the night before. But I wasn't ready to crash. Not yet. Not while Lisa was still in that apartment. Not while that coward was still out there, probably pretending none of this happened. Not while everything was still hanging open, unfinished. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, elbows resting on my knees, rubbing a hand through my hair. My head was buzzing, but my thoughts were sharp. Eventually, I pulled out my phone. Still nothing. No calls. No messages. Not even a text. Lisa hadn't reached out. She was waiting. Waiting for me to come to her. I exhaled, slow and heavy, gripping the phone a little tighter. All right. If she wasn't going to make the first move, I would. I scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. Lisa. No hearts. No emojis. No little nickname from better days. Just her name. Plain. Empty. Like she was just another person now. I stared at it for a few seconds, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I hit call. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. And then she answered. Neither of us said anything right away. All I could hear was her breathing on the other end. Shallow. Uneven. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft. Cautious. Where are you? Not I'm sorry. Not can we talk. Just that. Where are you? I smiled. But it wasn't out of humor. It was cold. Flat. Why? I asked. My voice came out smooth. Too smooth. She hesitated. I could picture her sitting on the edge of our bed, hands pulling at the sheets, trying to figure out which version of herself to be this time. I just want to talk, she said finally. Please. I leaned back against the stiff motel headboard, tapping my fingers lightly on the phone. What do you want to talk about, Lisa? A pause. Then, softer, almost a whisper. You know what? Yeah, I knew, but I wanted her to say it. I let the silence hang in the air, heavy. Let her squirm on the other end of the line. Then I spoke, and this time my voice came out like ice. You should start packing. Her breath caught. I heard it. Wait. I hung up. Let her sit with that. I didn't go racing back to the apartment. No, Lisa needed time. Time to panic. Time to pace the floor, to stare at the walls, to wonder if I was on my way back. Time to feel that gut-deep dread of knowing she couldn't fix this. And the best part? She had no one to run to. Her little secret, her backup plan? He was gone. That spineless bastard had burned rubber out of that parking lot, and I knew damn well he wouldn't be knocking on her door again. He had no fight in him, no courage, no love worth holding on to. He was just a mistake. And now, she was alone in that apartment, alone with the wreckage, alone with my voice in her head, telling her to pack, alone with the slow, creeping truth that this wasn't just a bad dream she could wake up from. This was real. And I was out there, still angry, still breathing, still planning. She could throw things into a suitcase. She could stare at her phone, hoping it would buzz. She could whisper apologies to the silence around her. But none of it would matter. She had already lit the match. Now she was going to watch everything go up in flames. I spent the rest of the morning walking the city, no direction in mind. Just moving, thinking, running through every possible ending. Do I go back and toss her out myself? Do I drag it out, let her sit in the uncertainty, sweat it out day after day? Do I tell everyone, our friends, our families, our neighbors, exactly what she did, blow it wide open so she can never escape it? So many options. And the best part? I had time. Lisa thought she still had some control left. Thought she could shape how this ended. That I'd fall in a line, play the role of the hurt husband, and eventually fade into the background. She thought I'd act like every other man who'd been cheated on. But I wasn't every other man. She had already lost me. Now it was time for her to lose everything else.